The flickering neon sign of the Dusty Boot casts long, distorted shadows as Maya weaves through the late-night crowd, a tray of empty glasses balanced precariously. She's a college student, a biology major with a minor in exhaustion, and her world often feels like it's held together by caffeine and the sheer stubborn refusal to drop the metaphorical tray of her responsibilities. Tonight, he's a new kind of chaos, a man slumped against the worn oak bar, a pristine Stetson tilted low over his eyes, looking less like a seasoned cowboy and more like someone who'd accidentally wandered off a movie set and into a genuine dive bar. He saved a woman from a spilled drink earlier, and in doing so, nearly sent himself tumbling. He had no idea who she really was, or the quiet storm brewing beneath her tired smile. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you believe love should feel like freedom, hit that like button and subscribe. He'd ordered water for the past hour, nursing it like it was 100-year-old whiskey, his gaze distant. Now, as Maya cleared his section, he mumbled something, a low rumble that was more vibration than words. "Sorry," Maya asked, leaning closer, the scent of old beer and something surprisingly expensive, sandalwood, clinging to him. He lifted his head slightly. Even in the dim light, his eyes were a startling blue, though currently clouded with something. Not just alcohol, she suspected. "Need air," he managed, his voice raspy. "And maybe a map." A small, weary smile touched Maya's lips. "Lost, cowboy?" He nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "Lost my damn horse," he slurred, then blinked as if surprised by his own words. "No, wait. Lost my bearings." He was clearly out of his element, a walking contradiction in his two new boots in the way his hand, when it fumbled for his wallet, revealed no calluses, only the smooth skin of someone unaccustomed to manual labor. He was hiding something, or running from it, and Maya, who knew a thing or two about needing an escape, felt an unexpected tug of sympathy. "Come on," she sighed, making a decision that her overdue rent and looming tuition payment probably wouldn't endorse. "Let's get you some of that air." She helped him to his feet. He was taller than she expected and leaned on her more heavily than she anticipated. As they stumbled out into the cool night, the city air sharp after the stale confines of the bar, she propped him against the brick wall. He took a deep breath, then another, his shoulders slumping. "Thank you," he said, his voice a little clearer now. "You're kind." "Just trying to keep the sidewalk decorative vomit free," she quipped, but the joke felt a little flat even to her. He looked less like a drunk and more like a man carrying an invisible mountain. And just like that, a stranger with smoke, sarcasm, and the faint, incongruous scent of sandalwood became the safest place she'd known in weeks. Maya's world was a landscape of worn textbooks, instant ramen, and the constant, low hum of anxiety about making ends meet. Her tiny studio apartment, a testament to creative space saving and a deep affection for fairy lights, was her sanctuary and her cage. The peeling paint on the windowsill, the drip from the kitchen faucet she learned to tune out, these were the textures of her reality. Her cat, a ginger tabby named Newton after her favorite physicist, and because he had a habit of knocking things off shelves, testing gravity, was her most consistent companion, offering purring commiseration during late-night study sessions. The tuition bill for the upcoming semester sat on her equally tiny kitchen counter, a stark white reminder of the chasm between her dreams and her bank account. Her part-time job at the Dusty Boot barely covered rent and groceries, let alone the colossal sum the university demanded. She briefly scrolled past a headline on her phone earlier while waiting for her shift to start. Tech titan Julian Vance takes unexpected sabbatical. Vance Corp stocks dip. She hadn't clicked on it. Tech moguls and their dramatic sabbaticals felt like news from another planet, utterly irrelevant to the orbits of her own life. The name meant nothing to her. The small town that housed Northwood University was usually quiet, a place where the biggest excitement was the annual Pie Festival. The Dusty Boot was an anomaly, a transplant from a rowdy-o imagination, but it paid the bills. For some of them. Tonight, though, felt different. The cowboy, who'd mumbled his name was Jed, was now a temporary fixture on her lumpy, second-hand couch. She'd managed to get a vague address from him, a motel on the outskirts of town that sounded as unconvincing as a Stetson, but he looked about ready to collapse long before they could have made it there. So, her couch it was. Newton, after a cautious sniff, had curled up at the stranger's feet, an endorsement Maya wasn't entirely sure Jed deserved, but accepted nonetheless. She watched him sleep for a moment, his face in repose looking younger, less burdened. There was a vulnerability there that tugged at her. This was the kind of impulsive decision her mother always warned her about, yet here she was. She was beginning to feel a strange sense of calm, a temporary reprieve from her own worries by focusing on his. It was a dangerous sort of peace, she knew, the kind that made the eventual return to reality even harsher. The next morning, the first sliver of dawn was painting the sky a soft gray when Maya woke with a start, her neck stiff from sleeping in her desk chair. The couch was empty. Jed, or whatever his name was gone. A neatly folded $20 bill sat on the threadbare armrest, beside a small, square piece of expensive-looking cardstock. The note, written in surprisingly elegant script, simply read, "Thank you for your kindness. J. $20. Maya almost laughed. For playing innkeeper to a mystery cowboy, it was something. She pocketed the cash, grabbed her bag, and rushed out, already late for her early morning organic chemistry lab. Newton meowed his disapproval at her hasty departure. It wasn't until she was halfway through her lecture, struggling to focus on molecular structures, that her phone buzzed with an email notification. University bursar's office. Her stomach clenched. Probably another payment reminder, more automated pressure. She almost ignored it, but a nagging feeling made her open it during a brief lull. Subject, tuition payment confirmation. Her breath caught. Dear Ms. Alastair, the email began. We are pleased to inform you that the outstanding balance for your fall semester tuition has been paid in full. An anonymous benefactor has made a contribution covering your full academic fees. Maya stared at the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Paid in full? Anonymous benefactor? It made no sense. Her gaze flicked to the $20 bill she'd shoved into her pocket, then back to the crisp, formal language of the email. She thought of the expensive cardstock, the elegant script, the sandalwood. The drunk cowboy. No, it couldn't be. That was insane. He was just some guy having a rough night. But the timing. Her mind raced, trying to connect dots that refused to align. He'd seemed so lost, so ordinary in his disorientation. She remembered his fumbling for a wallet, his vague talk of a motel. Nothing about him screamed anonymous benefactor. Yet, the tuition was paid. A wave of dizziness washed over her. This wasn't just a kind gesture, this was life-altering. And terrifying. Who was Jed? And why would he do this? The neatly stitched hem of his jeans, the subtle gleam of what looked like a designer watch partially hidden by his cuff, small details she'd barely registered at the time now replayed in her mind with startling clarity. He hadn't just been lost. He'd been out of place, a fish so far out of water he'd forgotten what gills were for. Her immediate reaction was a confusing mix of overwhelming relief and a profound, unsettling suspicion. She decided, right then, that she had to find him, not just to thank him, but to understand. The next few days were a blur of confusion and fruitless searching. Jed, it turned out, was as elusive as a desert mirage. The Dusty Boots owner, a grizzled man named Sal, just shrugged when Maya asked. Lots of cowboys, real and wannabe, pass through here, kid. Can't keep track of 'em all. The motel Jed had mumbled about, the Sleepy Cactus Inn, didn't exist, at least not in Northwood or any of the surrounding towns. The name itself sounded like something out of a bad western. She felt a growing unease. The sheer magnitude of the tuition payment was sinking in, and with it, a sense of obligation, of being caught in a story she didn't understand. She examined the note he'd left again. The cardstock was thick, creamy, with a subtle watermark she couldn't quite make out. The penmanship was precise, almost calligraphic. Not the scrawl of a man too drunk to find his way home. He'd been lucid enough to write this, to leave the 20, to slip away unnoticed. Who was this man who smelled of sandalwood and cheap whiskey, who wore new boots and could casually erase tens of thousands of dollars of debt? Her research into anonymous philanthropists turned up nothing. She spent hours in the university library, ostensibly studying, but really scrolling through articles about charitable foundations and high-net-worth individuals, looking for a pattern, a clue, anything. It was like searching for a specific grain of sand on a vast beach. Meanwhile, a different kind of tension was building within Julian Vance. He sat in a rented, deliberately unremarkable suburban house miles from Northwood, the cowboy disguise packed away. He'd gotten Maya's name from a piece of mail on her cluttered counter, a student loan statement, ironically. Paying her tuition had been an impulsive act, born from a gratitude so profound it felt like a physical ache, and a desperate, illogical desire to maintain some kind of connection, however invisible. He'd seen the worry in her eyes, the weariness that mirrored his own, albeit for different reasons. Her straightforward kindness, her lack of judgment when he was at his most vulnerable, had been a balm to a wound he hadn't realized was so raw. He knew he had to see her again, to explain. But how? The Cowboy act was done. Appearing as Julian Vance, CEO of Vance Corp, felt like an even greater deception. He replayed their brief interactions, her wry humor, the way she gently guided him, the almost maternal way she'd tucked a frayed blanket around him on the couch. He'd felt more himself in those few hours, stripped of his corporate armor, than he had in years. One afternoon, Maya was in the Daily Grind, the campus coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm latte and staring blankly at a page on Krebs cycle intermediates, when her gaze snagged on a magazine discarded on the next table. Forbes. And there, on the cover, was a face that made her blood run cold. It was him. Jed. Except he wasn't Jed. He was older here, sharper, his blue eyes piercing, his hair impeccably styled. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than her entire student loan debt. The headline screamed, "Julian Vance, the billionaire dropout?" Tech's enigmatic CEO vanishes. Her breath hitched. Julian Vance. The name from the news snippet. The drunk cowboy. Her anonymous benefactor. The room tilted. He looked so different, so powerful, so untouchable. The kindness she perceived, the vulnerability, now felt like a carefully constructed illusion. Or worse, the casual whim of a man so wealthy that changing a stranger's life was akin to buying a cup of coffee. The memory of his tired eyes, his quiet thanks, warred with the image of the corporate titan on the magazine cover. A hot flush of humiliation, then a cold wave of anger, washed over her. The relief she'd felt about her tuition was now tainted with a bitter taste of having been played, however benign the intention. That night, the memory of his easy breathing on her couch, Newton purring at his feet, felt less like a shared moment of quiet camaraderie and more like an invasion. It took Julian another week to work up the courage and to figure out a way to approach her that didn't involve another disguise or a corporate entourage. He found her walking out of the university library, her arms laden with books, a familiar furrow of concentration on her brow. He was dressed simply, in jeans and a plain sweater, but there was no hiding the inherent confidence that clung to him now that the Stetson was gone. "Maya." She stopped, her head snapping up. Her eyes widened, first in recognition, then in a way that made his stomach clench, a flicker of something that looked like betrayal. "Jed," she said, her voice flat, devoid of the warmth he remembered. Or should I say, Mr. Vance? She shifted the books in her arms, creating a small barricade. He winced. "Julian, please. Can we talk? Somewhere private." She hesitated, her gaze sweeping over him, taking in the subtle differences, the way he held himself. The lost cowboy was gone, replaced by someone far more formidable, yet his eyes held a nervousness that mirrored her own unease. They ended up on a park bench overlooking the campus green, a chilly autumn wind rustling the fallen leaves around their feet. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "The tuition," she began, her voice tight. "Why?" Julian took a deep breath. "It was a thank you. A clumsy one, I admit. I didn't mean to deceive you, Maya. Not really. The cowboy thing," he gestured vaguely, a flush rising on his neck, that was an escape. "I just needed to not be me for a while. The pressure, my life, it was all too much." He looked at her then, his blue eyes earnest. "You were incredibly kind to a stranger. You helped me when I was not at my best. When you didn't have to. That meant more to me than I can say. So you decided to pay off my crippling student debt as a thank you note?" Her voice was laced with a sarcasm that stung, but he knew he deserved it. "It was impulsive," he admitted. "I saw the loan statement. I knew it was a burden. And honestly," he paused, searching for the right words, "I think a part of me hoped it would. I don't know. Give me an excuse to see you again without the ridiculous hat." Maya stared at him, the anger warring with a confusing swirl of other emotions. The man on the magazine cover was a phantom. This man, sitting beside her, looking genuinely distressed, felt more real. "You could have just asked for my number," she said quietly. A humorless smile touched his lips. "And said what?" "Hi, I'm the drunk cowboy you rescued. And by the way, I'm also a reclusive billionaire who crashes on strangers' couches." It would have been less shocking than finding out via a magazine cover and a bursar's email, she conceded, a tiny bit of the ice in her tone melting. "Do you have any idea how crazy that was? One minute I'm drowning in debt, the next it's gone. Because a cowboy spent the night on my couch. I handled it badly, Julian said, his voice low. I'm used to solving problems with money. It's a bad habit. But that night, with you, talking about everyday things, your cat, your studies, it was the realest I've felt in years. The cowboy thing was a costume, yes, but the man who needed help, who appreciated your kindness, that was me. The real me, I think. So I was an experiment? Maya's voice was quiet now, but it carried a distinct chill that cut through the autumn air. A good deed for the rich guy trying to feel normal for a night? Did you write it off as a charitable expense? Julian flinched as if struck. No. God, no, Maya. It wasn't like that. You weren't an experiment. He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly between his knees, his gaze fixed on hers, desperate for her to understand. That night, I was at a breaking point. I just walked away from everything. My company, my life, the whole damn circus. I ended up at that bar because it felt like the furthest place from anything I knew. I didn't plan any of it. His voice was raw, stripped of pretense. She saw not the CEO, but the man from her couch, the one with the haunted eyes. The hat and boots were ridiculous, I know. I didn't want anyone to recognize me. I wanted to be invisible. You picked a conspicuous way to be invisible, she pointed out, a flicker of her old wryness returning despite herself. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Point taken. My undercover skills clearly need work. He sobered quickly. But you, Maya, you saw someone who needed help, and you helped. You didn't ask questions, you didn't judge. You just were there. The tuition. Yes, it was a grand gesture, maybe an inappropriate one. But it came from a genuine place. A place of immense gratitude. And, he hesitated, a desire to see you again. Tears pricked at Maya's eyes, tears of confusion, of lingering hurt, but also of a reluctant understanding. How can this even work, Julian? We're from different universes. My biggest worry before this was passing Argo and affording ramen. Your biggest worry is, what? Hostile takeovers? Which private island to vacation on? He didn't deny the chasm between their lives. Maybe, he said softly, his gaze unwavering. But that night, on your lumpy couch, with your opinionated cat, none of that mattered. We were just two people. You offered me kindness. I'd like a chance to offer you friendship. Maybe more, if you'd ever be willing. Not as Julian Vance, CEO, but as Jed. Well, Julian, the guy who's still trying to figure out who he is without the corporate letterhead. He reached out, hesitantly, and brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. His touch was light, questioning. She didn't pull away. The genuine emotion in his eyes, the vulnerability he was showing her now, felt more real than the glossy image on the magazine. The grand gesture of the tuition still felt overwhelming, almost like a gilded cage, but the man before her seemed just as trapped by his own circumstances as she had been by hers. I don't know, she whispered, the fight draining out of her. This is a lot. I know, he said gently. Take all the time you need. But please know, Maya, my intentions, however clumsily executed, were never to hurt or use you. They were simply to connect. He stood slowly. If you want to talk again, or yell at me some more, you know how to find me. I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. He gave her a small, hopeful smile, then turned and walked away, leaving her on the bench with the swirling leaves and the even more turbulent swirling of her thoughts. She watched him go, the powerful CEO somehow looking as solitary as the lost cowboy had. A week later, Maya found herself outside a surprisingly modest coffee shop downtown, one Julian had mentioned in a brief, hopeful text message that simply gave the address and, if you're free, coffee's on me. Promise it's not a philanthropic endeavor. She pushed open the door, a bell tinkling softly. He was there, at a small table by the window, nursing a coffee and looking out at the street with a thoughtful expression. He wasn't wearing a suit or a Stetson, just jeans and a worn sweater that looked comfortable, real. He saw her, and a slow smile spread across his face, a smile that reached those startling blue eyes, making them look less haunted. You came, he said, his voice warm with relief. Newton insisted, Maya replied, a small smile playing on her own lips as she slid into the chair opposite him. He said you still owed him for the emotional distress of having a stranger sleep on his couch. Julian chuckled, a genuine, relaxed sound. I'll add it to my tab. So, organic chemistry. Still a beast. And just like that, they talked. Not about corporations or tuition fees, but about her classes, his tentative steps into a life without board meetings, her love for cheesy sci-fi movies, his surprising fondness for baking bread, a hobby he'd recently discovered. He asked about her dreams, the ones that went beyond just graduating and listened with an intensity that made her feel truly seen. She, in turn, asked him about what he actually liked, beyond the pressures and expectations that had defined him for so long. The coffee was ordinary, the shop unpretentious. There was an ease between them, fragile yet promising. He was still Julian Vance, the man who could alter lives with a keystroke, and she was still Maya Alistair, the student figuring things out. But for now, in the warm glow of the afternoon sun filtering through the window, they were just Julian and Maya. "For what it's worth," he said, as they were leaving, the conversation having dwindled to a comfortable silence, "I'm still terrible at pretending to be a cowboy." Maya laughed, a real, light-hearted sound. "Good. Stick to baking bread. And maybe," she added, her eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief, "let me buy the coffee next time. My treat." He met her gaze, his own soft and full of a quiet hope. "I'd like that very much." They stepped out into the crisp autumn air, a shared glance passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the strange path that had brought them together and the even stranger, more hopeful path that might lie ahead. It wasn't a grand romantic climax, but a quiet understanding, a gentle alignment of two souls who had found an unexpected refuge in each other. A new, tentative normal was beginning, built not on grand gestures, but on shared laughter and the promise of another cup of coffee. Thanks for watching. If you believe in second chances and real love, give this story a like and subscribe for more.